Alright, well, we tried to figure out how to make the feeding pipe easily, and so we were using just concrete block and making a hole, which we thought would be nice and big, using a bucket to make the penetration into the Puxin, and then just surrounding it by concrete block. And it worked a bit, but only for ground food. We did the same thing over here. But then we realized that food floats and grass floats, and a big opening just lets the food float up, and so it never really goes down. And we developed a technique with a plunger, but it only really works if the thing is on an incline, and even so it begins to float up on the top. Now this we can twist to get the food to fall off, and then we can push the food waste back down, because in the situation where you have an incline, what happens is the gravity is pushing up this way, so the food's trying to float, but it hits a ceiling here in the pipe, and that makes it easier to push down by gravity so that it gets into the hole. And an 8-inch pipe is a little bit better because it contains it a bit, so that gravity can work and friction can work. Friction from the top of the pipe and gravity pulling it down, but the floaty stuff is sort of fighting gravity, going the opposite direction. Then it hits the top of the pipe, and friction helps to push it down, especially when you have a plunger. In this case, it doesn't work at all. Even though we made a plunger here to go down, because this is vertical, the food waste sludge just comes up and cakes around it and floats up, and it never gets down inside. So that is the problem using a vertical feed-in pipe. So now Ricardo and Alex are going to assemble a piece of an 8-inch pipe, which was broken, or rather cut, and make one long tube out of it, and put one in horizontally in an incline, as we see here, the fix that we had to do. On this one, on the big dragon, we saw that vertical, well, semi-vertical, worked, but it only worked because we have the Incinerator food grinders over here, and when you grind the food, then you can get it down a throat, a vertical throat. There's an Incinerator under this as well. So when we grind up the food waste and put it in a bucket, grind the food and store it in the bucket, then feeding the dragon, feeding through the vertical pipe is okay. It actually stacks, and the weight of the ground up food with the water pushes it down the throat and into the belly of the beast, and then the overflow goes down here. But when you don't grind it, as I showed, it just cakes up over the plunger and never really goes down. So we've drained this tank out, and having drained it, we're now going to cut a hole like we did last time down here and put that pipe in, the 8-inch pipe. Imagine that you could use a 12-inch pipe. We were trying for 12 inches. That's why we made the hole so big, by using a bucket to use the penetration, but it still allows stuff to float over the food waste that's trying to get down. It just keeps bubbling over or lifting over, so it just doesn't work. So we filled that in, and we're going for this. The more of an incline we make, the better off we are, and that should be the end of it. We've done the experiment. It was really nice to do it out of concrete block, I have to say. I wish it had worked, and we know it does work if you're using ground food, but that's a lot of labor to grind it. One thing we did learn from doing this experiment is we learned that without doing any waterproofing on the inside, with no waterproofing at all, a microbiological film, or a biofilm, formed. You can see it here, this white stuff now, the greenish stuff, the blackish stuff. This biofilm sealed the cement so that we had a big leak here, we had a big leak here, big leak here. I mean, it was spraying out. And over here, there was a big leak. Over here, there was a micro leak, little leaks there. But in time, the biofilm formed and made a seal so that it didn't need to be waterproofed. So in the first day you're thinking, oh my, this is a disaster. Look at, there was a leak here, here, and here. And literally it was spraying out. But when we waited a couple of days only, all these areas sealed up. And that's true for the entire digester. You do see some sweating here and here. You see some of those white marks there. So you'd say, well, you need to waterproof, but that takes time and expensive. And we've proven now that the biofilm that forms, you can see some of that scum there, in a well-fed digester, stops the leaking. So you don't need to worry about leaking. There will be some sweating, but no leaking. So that was a major finding for us, that you can save on any labor and time and materials by building your cement digester and then filling it with manure and slurry and then waiting. Now if you just filled it with water, it would just keep leaking very badly. But the thing is, we filled this digester with the slurry from this digester, from the overspill, and that was sufficient to clog up whatever holes were in the concrete. So that's an important thing. I shout that out to Elisa Dendro and Robert Hall and the folks in Sweden, where we have our other set of Puxin molds, where they built a digester in Gotland in the Suderbine Eco Village, because they were saying that they're having issues of the concrete leaking. And our observation is that the leaking is just a kind of sweating once the biofilm kicks in. All right, well, we're going to work on this, and we hope you learn from our experiments, our trials and errors, and know that you should always put your feeding pipe on an angle. That makes the most sense. All right.